It's been a rocky start for the season for the Pelicans, but I'm going to tell you why Brandon Boston Jr. and Yves Missi have been bright spots for New Orleans and how the team can use them most effectively going forward. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Friday. We have a game tonight. Pelicans on the road after that 4-game homestand, going on to take the Orlando Magic on. We will maybe touch on this one on Sunday. I'm going to try and get a bonus show in after missing a show earlier in the week for y'all from being sick here. But we're going to look at Brandon Boston Jr., Yves Missi, and a little bit more of the Pelicans offense and defense as we get into the third segment of today's show, because there's a lot I want to talk about with these two players and the right roles for them and how they can help New Orleans win some games sooner rather than later. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNBA to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And of course, don't forget about the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now over at lockedondaily.com. We're doing really well with that, which is awesome to see. New Orleans always showing out when you need it too. So let's get into a couple of the players here for New Orleans. And I want to start with Brandon Boston Jr. because I am a Brandon Boston Jr. fan. Started the other night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I thought he should have started against the Atlanta Hawks too, really. And also got the start against the Portland Trailblazers. He's been, I don't want to scream like revelation, future star. I'm not going to go into the hyperbole around that. But he is definitely a rotation player, and he has looked really good. And he's giving the Pelicans a much-needed boost in a couple of areas. So I want to look at his play here. And I thought it was somewhat interesting that he did start over a healthy-ish Jordan Hawkins on Wednesday night against the Cavaliers. I'm not sure if that was so much of they believe in Brandon Boston Jr. over Hawkins. Hawkins was on a minutes restriction, and I'd be willing to bet that has something to do with Brandon Boston Jr. getting that start over him. But truthfully, Brandon Boston Jr. is more of a bench player to me, but a really needed one and useful one for this Pelicans team. So first and foremost, he has good size. This is a guy who's 6'7". He's more of a two guard than a wing, but 6'7" with pretty good size. When you look at kind of his body and what he looks like on the court, you see shades of Brandon Ingram. And that was one of his comps coming into the NBA after his time at Kentucky, which was not particularly good, was that Brandon Ingram was kind of one of the comps that he would have. And look, that's a useful player. There are limitations. You need them to change, as Brandon Ingram is doing this year. But a guy like that coming off the bench can be an absolutely incredible player for the team and someone that is, at times really important. That's not the comp that I see with the way that he plays. With that length, with some of the speed and athleticism that he has too. Honestly, I see his NBA comp right now, and he reminds me a lot, and I saw this immediately with him, of Kevin Martin. He used to be with Sacramento with the Houston Rockets as well before bouncing around the league a little bit, playing with OKC, Minnesota at times as well. That's someone who, for his 12-year career, averaged 17.4 points per game. Just was a lightning bug scorer off the bench, off of starts, and just a guy that could kind of go and get his own shot. And that's what Brandon Boston Jr. really brings to this team that is lacking elsewhere. From that guard position and even some of the wing position, they don't have a lot of guys that can create their own shot. That's a skill that's lacking on this roster, that's just creation. Brandon Boston Jr. definitely can do that. Is he the most efficient or effective at it? No, not necessarily. But this is someone that if you put the ball in his hands, he can absolutely go and get a shot off and score for you. And when you look at him over these past 4 games, this homestand, he's done pretty well. 14 points, 14 points, 20 points, 14 points. He's chipping in other areas too, whether that's assists, 5 of them against the Cavaliers, 4 against the Trailblazers, 4 against the Atlanta Hawks before that. You're also seeing him get you some rebounds as well, even if it's not in, that above 5 range, he's still doing it. He's generating some steals with that length that he has too. This is someone that is not perfect, but with a second unit, I think is a really useful player to have. I don't view him as a starter, an all-star guy, but a rotation player in the NBA, someone that can get his own shot. Like, yes, absolutely, that is a guy that should be on this team. Now, it might be a little bit tough depending on where they are with the salary cap. And the other thing to keep in mind with two-way guys is they're only allowed 50 games at the NBA level. So they're already using him a lot, and they might not be able to use him later. And look, his role would also diminish a little bit here as this team gets healthy. When you get Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Dejounte Murray, and CJ McCollum back, there's fewer minutes to go around and roles lessen. But this is someone that, if you put him on the second unit with a guy like Jose Alvarado to help create, with a shooter like Trey Murphy, even using a guy like, whether it's Daniel Tice or what have you, as your center there, you can build a lineup around him that should work. You could have Hawkins in on this too. All of those things should work exceptionally well. I'm pretty excited about what they found in him. And this is a guy that hasn't had a ton of time to practice with the team, to build chemistry with the team. More on that in terms of the team in general in the third segment of today's show. You look at this guy, and they're not even scratching kind of the surface of what he could bring to the team. How many times have we seen a second unit that has really struggled here to just score, no offense whatsoever? Brandon Boston Jr. is the type of guy that can kind of alleviate some of those concerns and fill some of that role. I like what we've seen from him. We'll see what his minutes fully look like when the team is healthy, if the team gets healthy, and it'll certainly be different. But there is definitely a role on here for him with the Pelicans, and I've been pretty pleased with what we've seen. The three-point shooting has been good from him as well. This is someone who's shooting right now 37% from 3. If you look at it over the last 4 games, let me pull those numbers up for him too, because that's really when he's played much better and started to get some minutes. I think it's a little bit better. Yeah, his 3-point percentage, if this ever loads, is going to be much better than 39%, so it goes up a little bit on 4.5 attempts per game. That's pretty good. Over the past 4, he's averaging 15.5 points per game on 11.3 field goal attempts. He's getting to the line. He rebounds. He's giving you about 4 assists per game during that time. The numbers have been good. Put him in the right role, not against starters, and this is a guy that should really be able to contribute. Maybe the Pelicans have found their Kevin Martin, who, by the way, was involved in that vetoed, rejected, rescinded, whatever you want to call it, Chris Paul trade a number of years ago. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But that's my comp for him. They're also the same height, 6'7", too, which I didn't realize. But he definitely reminds me of Kevin Martin, and I'm glad the Pelicans have found him. What about another useful player for New Orleans? Yves Missi didn't close the game. More minutes for Jeremiah Robinson Earl than Missi. I tried explaining it a little bit in yesterday's show. You should give that a listen if you haven't. But no, he should be playing more minutes, and there's a way New Orleans needs to do it, but there's also some limitations there too. Let's kind of look at that dichotomy and what's maybe preventing him from getting minutes, and how do you find minutes for him, and what should Willie Green be doing with him? That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money. Think about that. On Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct Picks. And Prize Picks is the best way to get in on action in sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's absolutely guaranteed. So if you think Steph Curry will get more than 4 3-pointers in the next game, Anthony Edwards to get more than 27 points, Zion Williamson to get more than 5 rebounds, you can cook up all these hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And now this season, you can get an early big return on FanDuel with just a $5 bet. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed here. That's bonus bets to go put on whatever it is you might be looking for here. Pelicans Magic tonight in Orlando. Pelicans plus 4.5. Magic struggling without Paolo Banchero. This might be the time to get in on the action here. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, the NBA, and all the sports all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are, again, the #1 Pelicans podcast. And of course, become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget about the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. You can go to LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter coming to you Monday through Friday. That's really cool. It's also like ranking 6th most right now. Think about that. New Orleans showing up a lot of these big markets. That's more than New York, Brooklyn, right behind the Lakers by less than 100 people subscribe to it. Let's go send a message here to everyone around the league. Right now, though, a guy that's sending a message to the team is Yves Missi, sending a message to me, too, because I was not high on that draft pick, but he has looked pretty good when he's out there. Now, this is a guy that is still raw, doesn't do everything well, and does get lost at times, but you're seeing some really good play from the rookie, and he's far more ready than we thought he was going to be, particularly on the defensive side of the ball where he's averaging 1.6 blocks per game. And during some of this home stretch, he was banged up. He got hurt on the road a little bit and didn't quite look like himself. But in 22 minutes per game, he's averaging 6.2 points on 5.3 field goal attempts, getting to the line 2.1 times, averaging 6 boards, 1.7 assists, 0.4 steals, and 1.6 blocks. Most importantly, and the most impressive thing to me is the fouls, just 1.4 per game. Limited minutes. If we extrapolate that out to per 36, it jumps to 2.4, but he's not even getting close to fouling out of the game or anything like that. And to me, that was going to be the biggest issue for him. Would he be fouling? Would he be able to stay on the court? The answer to that is yes, and that really speaks to him absorbing the game, learning, listening to the coaches, buying in, doing the things that they're telling him, and just improving his play. So then why did Jeremiah Robinson Earl get more minutes than him against the Cleveland Cavaliers? Jeremiah Robinson Earl played 25.5 minutes. Yves Missi played 18 minutes, 45 seconds. So especially then when you look at Jeremiah Robinson Earl was a -7 and Yves Missi was a -2. There's a difference there. So for the everydayers, I kind of went in and looked at the small ball lineup and the rationale behind what Willie Green was trying to do. Whether I agree or disagree with it, whether you agree or disagree with it, is kind of besides the point. That's what the coach was trying to do. You want me to explain what's going on the court? That's what it is. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I don't know if Missi was going to help you late in the game when you're trying to generate offense for Zion Williamson with those two basically occupying the same spaces on the court. We've seen them just with, two non-shooters, one of them being Zion, another being the center, it doesn't always work. So small ball to space the court out makes sense. The problem with the small ball lineup was you weren't doing the small ball things, taking more threes, playing with pace. Some of that has to do with the lack of talent and the injuries that this team is going through, and we'll look at that more in the next segment here. But they've got to find a way to get Missi out there on the court. He's playing well, the rim protection is good, and the shot blocking is needed on this team. They haven't had a big man like that in a really long time, probably since Anthony Davis. But he does have limitations, and that's kind of where the rub comes in, and it's not necessarily easy to balance, and it has to do with the team's defensive scheme. The team's defensive scheme is they want to switch. When it comes to defense in the NBA, it's really predicated on how do you defend the pick and roll, the most common action. How do you defend the pick and roll? And there's a variety of different ways to do it. The one that the Pelicans like to do is they switch. So when a screen comes, you don't have your players fight through screens. You just go, okay, the big man now guards the smaller guy, and then your smaller guy guards the bigger guy. You just switch. So you don't even really need to deal with that screen whatsoever. And it can lead to you getting cross-matched. So guard on a big man and vice versa here. And that's what you saw in that game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Pelicans would switch, and you would have Yves Missi put on a guy like Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland, and it didn't go well. Missi is a rim protecting big. He's not necessarily, at least not right now, a guy that's going to do a really good job defending on the perimeter. So Jeremiah Robinson-Earl can at least switch on the perimeter, and that's what this team wants. It was kind of the same issue with Jonas Valanciunas and Larry Nance Jr. last year. Jonas couldn't switch. Larry could, even if Jonas is the better player and a more useful player. You need to put Larry out there because it's at least not killing your defense. So that's the reason why. But here's the thing about that, right? A head coach needs to put his players in position to succeed. And if they're not doing that with Yves Missi, the answer isn't necessarily sit him down on the bench. It's change up your defensive coverage. And likely what you would need to do with Yves Missi is play something called drop coverage. And that's in the pick and roll. Rather than fighting through the screen, the big man just kind of sags back, ready to try and take away both the roll man and the ball handler. Really focusing on the ball handler can sometimes leave you open for a lob or something like that in the pick and roll. But with Missi's athleticism, he might be able to break that up. So you put him in drop coverage, let him sag back and try and protect the rim. This does not work exactly with the Pelicans. They don't run a lot of drop coverage at all. And that's why Willie Green is kind of a little bit hesitant to play him. So look, change your coverage and play drop with Missi and let him actually be a rim protector. And even if you don't close games that way, do this in the first half. Do this in the third quarter, and at least find ways to put Missi out there on the court more with a change in scheme, a change in coverage. Maybe you don't close with him, but that would get Missi more minutes than what we saw in this game. And I think that could be a good sort of balance with it. I get Willie Green defaulting to what he's comfortable having the team do, but you've got to find minutes for talent, and Missi is that. And that's what was kind of lacking to me in the Cavaliers game. Would they have been as close if it was Missi late? Truthfully, I don't know. So it could be one of those things where it ultimately doesn't matter either way. But they need to find a way to kind of get Missi out there. And there's limitations to running drop coverage too. Your team's not used to practicing that. Is that something you can just throw out there, during the season when you don't have tons of practice time? These teams don't really get 20 even full hard practices during the course of the regular season. You get some walkthroughs, some light practices, things like that. Is there a way that you could integrate that in there a little bit just to get Missi more time on the court and see about his impact? And I do think that would be a pretty important thing to try and do. Finding the balance, that's the head coach's challenge here. I get why they went small. I can't tell you if it was the right or the wrong decision. It's too small of a sample size to say. I mean, they lost the game and they weren't playing like a small ball team, so maybe there is something to that it wasn't the right idea and they should have done something differently. But you've got to find ways to get your game-changing talent, especially when you're this injured, on the court. And Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, who has played better than we were expecting from him, certainly isn't a long-term piece. You've got to develop your guys, and that is something that at times, not always, at times, the Pelicans have struggled to do under head coach Willie Green. Think about Trey Murphy being glued to the bench his rookie year when maybe he should have been playing more. So they need to find ways to get him more minutes. Drop coverage is certainly going to maximize his talent. Can you integrate that in or not is going to be really the big question when it comes to it. Otherwise, yeah, there's going to be stretches where you sit him down and he's going to be on the bench because he's not fitting what you want. But make what you do something that he excels in or can do, and then all of a sudden he's on the court and that's more talent there, especially when you're this injured. Do you agree? Do you disagree on how they should be using Missi? Should he have been closing that game against the Cavaliers? Let me know in the comments down below. So coming up next, let's look a little bit at the offense, about the Cavaliers kind of looking like the team the Pelicans want to be. What goes into that? What goes into like sticking to the scheme and things like that? There's a couple misconceptions I want to clear up. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Skims Menswear. Look, my fiance has a bunch of the Skims products. She raves about them. So when I saw they were making men's stuff, I was kind of excited to give it a try. And like these things, look, they delivered. I travel a lot on planes a good bit, going back and forth from the Smoothie King Center to the office here, doing all that. You're running around. I work out regularly too. I just need an pair of underwear that I can throw on that is going to get me through all of that. And look, the Skims boxer brief is like the go-to now. I've ordered a bunch more pairs of these. I like the stretch fabric in it. You know, when I'm working out, they still feel comfortable, but they're keeping everything in place. When I'm on a plane, on a 4 or 5 hour plane, I feel great. They're breathable. They're comfortable. I just did a 4-day drive from California to New Orleans, wore a pair every day, different pair every day, but wore them every day because it felt good to be in the car. Things weren't getting too sweaty, stuff like that. Just all the movement you need without feeling like you're wearing something uncomfortable. And I think that's a really important thing. So I love the Skims Stretch 5-inch boxer brief. So you can shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That's skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect holiday gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever, also available over at skims.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Let me know if you're an everydayer in the comments down below. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your second listen today, Locked On Saints with host Ross Jackson breaking down everything black and gold. New head coach, new changes coming. We feeling good for Sunday? Ross Jackson over the Locked On Saints podcast is going to make sense of everything black and gold and what you should be looking for. Make them your second listen today. And then don't forget the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, lockedondaily.com. Click on the Pelicans logo to sign up for that. So let's start to wrap up the show, and I want to look at the Cavaliers' offense in the game last night. They have one of the best offenses in the league, currently second best, and it looked like it in that game. Putting up 131 points. Their offensive rating was like 135 or something like that. It was really, really good. What they do is they play with pace. They get into their offense and they just generate a good shot early. Essentially, when I watch them play, you kind of look at that and go, oh, this is who the Pelicans want to be when it comes to their offense. Quick offense before the defense gets set, taking advantage of guys kind of slowly getting back and doing all of that here. Trying to pull up what the pace in this game was, and I'm having trouble finding it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. This was basically an offensive shootout. They want to get in there early. They want to get you before you're set and let Donovan Mitchell attack or generate a good open three-point look. It's exactly what the Pelicans want to do, and at times it was starkly contrasted where New Orleans, especially in the fourth quarter, would get down the court, struggle deep into the shot clock to generate a good look, and then kind of have like a mid-range bailout shot that maybe went in, maybe didn't, but looked like they just struggled to create any sort of thing. Right now, the Pelicans don't have the talent to look like the Cleveland Cavaliers. You actually see them looking for early offense. I mean that, but they're just not able to do it, right? There is a scheme here and you're seeing it. They're just not executing it particularly well. It looks like a very different team than they were on that 4-game road trip where there was just no concept of playing. Guys weren't trying. That's when I was ready to call for head coach Willie Green to be fired, and I stand by that. And now they look different. Right now, what I see is a team that's lacking talent to do what they want to do, but there is a scheme there. If you don't have the talent or even the chemistry, scheme doesn't matter then. It won't work or win you games. And what I mean by chemistry is, how many different starting lineups have they used this year? 6, 7, something like that. How many of these guys have had times to actually play together, with just one player on the lineup that they're in, let alone with all 4 other guys? The Cavaliers have some of that consistency, even if they've been through injuries in the past year. This is a group that's played together for a minute. There's a lot of that kind of chemistry built in, trust built in, understanding each other's tendencies built in that the Pelicans do not have right now. So the Pelicans did try for early offense. They tried, but they were just slowed down by better players on a really good defense for the Cavaliers. And at times they weren't on the same page because of how many different starting lineups they've had. You know what helps with that? Health. You know what also helps with that? Your starting point guard in Dejounte Murray. They'll be able to get into their sets quicker with Murray out there organizing the team. That is a blow. I'm not even going to pretend that isn't a blow for this team and isn't hurting them. It's a big one, in my opinion. You want the early offense. He's going to help with that. What's also going to help is just more talent. At times, it's just Brandon Ingram and Brandon Boston Jr. as the threats out there on the court. So when you throw 2 bodies at those guys, it is tough to sometimes get a pass off out of a trap and then get into your early offense. A lot of what's slowing them down in the shot clock is traps, really limiting their dribbling ability and ability to get a pass off. It's leading to turnovers too. More talent helps that. More threats on the court helps that. When Zion's out there with Ingram and Brandon Boston Jr., you're seeing a difference. When Murray's going to be out there, it'll be different. With Trey Murphy, it's going to be different. CJ, it's going to be different. All of that is going to really change the way this team looks. So health. And then some of the guys have actually played together. And that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. So we're going to see a change in this team later. They're running the scheme. They just don't have the people to really execute it right now. They were going to need to be near perfect against Cleveland to win this game, but they really did compete and probably played to the best of their ability with some of the players they had out there on the court. That's what we're going to have to settle for right now. It sucks. No one wants moral victories. We want actual victories, and I agree. I don't know if this was truly a winnable game, but they competed for as long as they could. They've been doing that while they're having just decimated with injuries. You don't see any other team this banged up to the degree that they are. And if they were looking like they did against Golden State, like they did against Portland on the road, trust me, I'd be yelling they need to make some bigger changes here. But you're seeing the scheme. They just don't have the people to actually execute it well, and that's a big part of the problem right now. That'll get fixed when they have other guys out there. You want to also know what should get fixed a little bit is the defense and slowing opponents down. Herb Jones, Dejounte Murray is going to do that, right? The Warriors have one of the top defenses in the league because they have the guys to do that. So you can miss someone like Steph Curry and it'll be fine. Pelicans are missing by far their 2 best defensive players right now in Murray and Jones, right? Like that's not even close. That'll get better on that side of the ball. The team needs to try better, and they need to clean up some of those backdoor cuts and just kind of awareness issues that they're going through right now, and they can probably do that. But the bigger thing is just going to be get the bodies back out there on the court in Murray and Jones, and that's going to help you. But the Pelicans are running a scheme. I just don't think they have the overall talent to do it. I just said that Brandon Boston Jr. is a better guy off the bench than a starter. Jose Alvarado is better off the bench than he is as a starter. When they get some of the starters back, I think you'll see this offense look pretty good because it looked pretty good in this game too. And the Pelicans came out and played well. With Zion hopefully healthy, everything else, this team, just get some of these people back, please. Kind of as simple as that. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Maybe a bonus show Saturday or Sunday. We'll see how I'm feeling. That's going to do it here. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all next time. Enjoy the game. Oh, we got to hit the outro video. Here we go.